Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up. I'll also run through a few of the books that I'm planning to read in July. I have been mood reading even more than I typically do this month. It's been really interesting actually in terms of what I read. I read absolutely zero fantasy this month because I think the last couple of months I read quite a lot of fantasy and I think I just needed a break from the genre. I read some sci-fi and then I read a bunch of non-SFF books as well. So with that in mind, let's jump into the books that I read. The first book that I read was actually a manga, and that was a manga that I've talked about in the past, and that is Hireyasumi by Kaigo Shinzo. This is a absolutely amazing manga that is just the most relaxing, peaceful manga or piece of fiction that I've ever read. It's one of those manga that I like to read when, life is particularly busy and I really need to just like relax and I really need to just get out of my head. And this is one of the few pieces of fiction that is able to do that for me. Volume 5 was another 5 stars. It's incredible. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And I strongly recommend that you pick it up. Absolutely phenomenal. I've only got 2 volumes left and I'm so sad. It's not finished. There's still more volumes to come, but now I'm going to have to wait like everybody else, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. The next one is a book that again, I talked about in my last wrap up, and I'm probably going to do a review of the volumes that I've read so far. And that is the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. And this is by Beth Bauer. This was another 5 stars. This is also another series that is just the gift that keeps on giving. Again, similar to Hireyasumi, it's the sort of series that I want to read where life is especially busy because the characters really just take me out of what is happening in my life and what is happening in the world. It is just an absolute delight to read. These characters continue to develop and grow in a way that I'm just loving, and I just adore it. Like, I love Emma as a character. I love all of our other cast of characters, whether it's Pierce or Hawkes or Islington, whoever it is. I love every single character in the series. And again, similar to Hireyasumi, I'm about to come up to speed with where the author is at. There is more volumes to come, but they're probably not going to come for quite a while. So again, it is what it is, but I think this is also one of those series that I'm going to reread because it's just so good. It's so good. So obviously I gave it a 5 stars. Very, very easy 5 stars to give, to be honest. Next, we have a Japanese fiction book, and that is Tokyo Ueno Station by Yu Miri. This is a really fascinating book. It's quite short, and we're essentially following the perspective of our main character who becomes homeless. Now, homelessness in Japan is not really something that we hear much about. It's not known for its homelessness, right? Like, when you see videos or pictures of Japan, it's known for being extremely clean. It's known for not really having a homelessness problem, like say like the US or even to some extent the UK, other parts of the world, right? Like, Japan is just not known for that. So seeing this book from the perspective of our character, who isn't homeless from the start, he almost decides to become homeless because he doesn't want to be a burden on his family. And it's just such a fascinating insight into, one, what it means to be homeless, but 2, what it means to be homeless in a culture that is quite ignorant to these things. And I don't mean that necessarily in a kind of critical way. I think the kind of idea of homelessness in Japan is particularly appealing because it's just not something that you hear about. I've often thought, like, is it because it doesn't exist, or is it just because it's swept under the carpet? And reading this book, I think it's the latter. And I do think they generally just don't have much of a homelessness problem compared to, say, like the US or the UK. But they still have a homelessness problem, right? There is still people who end up on the streets and they're fighting for their life every single day. It's incredibly sad, but at the same time, it's quite touching because we get these moments of community and heartfelt interactions between our characters. And I think it's one of those books that if you want something that's just going to maybe show you an alternative side to Japanese society, then I think this is a book that you should read. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I think it was solid. I think some of the pacing was a bit off personally, but I think overall it did a really good job of presenting a different side to Japanese society. Next is a sci-fi book that I absolutely loved, and that was Hero's Journey by Sterling E. Lanier. This is a book that I've heard nobody talk about. This is a book that was put onto my radar by one of my Patreons, and it was absolutely fantastic. Hero's Journey is set think it's like hundreds of years after a catastrophic event that is caused by the human race. And essentially he is trying to rediscover human artifacts. So he's exploring the world around him. This is a version of the US. So it is set in the US, but it's the US in a very different way. You know, there aren't many people in the world. There are these kind of beasts that roam the world. And our main character hero is trying to kind of battle against those beasts whilst also trying to rediscover, you know, what happened and what led to the events that happened that essentially almost caused the end of the world. Very philosophical. Hero's a really interesting character. We get some really interesting exploration around like what makes societies fall. But then there is some really interesting exploration around religion as well, because our main character hero is a priest and the order that he belongs to is obviously a religious order. So it's quite multi-layered, and even though it's quite a short book, there's a lot covered in this book. There is a second book as well, and it was supposed to be a trilogy, but unfortunately the author passed, I believe, before he was able to write the third book. But honestly, read the first book as a standalone if you want to. I mean, there's definitely more to explore in the second book, which I'm really looking forward to. If you want like a quick sci-fi read that's going to pose some really interesting questions, then you should definitely read it. I gave this one a 4.25 stars. I think it's really solid. I think the only reason why I didn't rate it higher is because there was a character that was introduced later on in the book that I just did not care about. And I would have preferred that she was not in the book. That's a personal preference thing. It didn't drastically negatively impact my review of the book. The next one I read was a sci-fi book, and that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that has been highly anticipated for me. A lot of people that I really rate really enjoyed this book. Like, shout out to Penny. I know you love this book, Penny, and part of the reason why I wanted to read it is because people like Penny, but also Dan, one of my patrons, kind of talked about it very positively. So I had fairly high expectations about this book. I wouldn't say they were super high, but like I had expectations, right, going into it. And I think, unfortunately, I was expecting something fundamentally different from what I got. This is a book that is essentially telling us what happens after a pandemic hits. And it's very character driven. And I think if you like the characters and you're interested in their stories, then you're going to love it. If you're indifferent and you don't really care, it's going to hugely impact your reading experience of this book. And that's unfortunately what happened to me. There were two things that I really did not like about this book that I will talk about in more depth in my review. And I'm not going to talk about them now because you should go watch my review when it comes out. But there were two things that really did not gel with me. And that's what hindered my reading of this book. I gave it 3 stars, which isn't bad by any means. I did expect my rating of this book to be higher before I started reading it because I did think I was going to love it. I do think the author is a very talented writer. It's just that there were certain things that I didn't connect with that I think a lot of other people do. So 3 stars. It was okay. I'm excited to read more of her stuff in the future. Then the next book that I read was one of the best books I've ever read. Like, I was absolutely stunned multiple times as I was reading this book. And when I finished reading this book, I was sat on my sofa for about 2 hours just thinking about what I had read because it's so good. And that is The Samurai by Shusaku Endo. Shusaku Endo, I think, is more well known for the book that he wrote before this, and that is Silence, which Martin Scorsese did a film. I think it won a bunch of awards, like it was pretty critically acclaimed. I haven't seen it yet because I want to read the book first. And I was originally going to read that one first, but I decided to read The Samurai first because I wanted to kind of get a feel for his writing, and I also have pretty high expectations of Silence, so I thought I would start with one that I'd literally never heard anyone talk about. And it was the best decision that I ever made. This is a book, and I will do a full review on this because it deserves the time and attention, but this is a book really at its core about kind of faith and why people believe the things they do and what they're willing to do in the name of faith. But at the same time, it's a deeply introspective character study of our two main characters and how they're grappling with their own identity in relation to the faith that they have. One of them is a Catholic priest of the Franciscan order. The other one is a Buddhist, and he is a samurai. And both of these people have very interesting journeys that are very similar in many ways, but in other ways, they're also very different. And it's just absolutely incredible. It is absolutely incredible. It is without a doubt one of the best books I've ever read. It was one of those books that I purposefully read extremely slowly. I mean, I still read it in a week, but like I read it a lot slower than I normally would because it's quite a short book. It's like 300 pages, which normally a 300-page book would take me like 3 or 4 days. This, I think it took me about 8 days because I just lapped up the writing, I lapped up the thematic work, and the characters were so interesting. Like, I just cannot stress enough how good this book is. Like, it's incredible. Wait for my review. Obviously, I gave it a 5 stars. It's just breathtaking, honestly. So good. So good. Like, I think right now, this is probably my favourite book of the year. I don't know though, because I've read quite a lot of incredible books this year, but it's definitely up there. Definitely up there. Then the next book that we have that I read was The Unselected Journals of Emma N. Lyon, Volume 6. Second to last book until I'm up to speed. Again, life's been really busy at the moment, so I've just been loving these books. They really take me out of my world. 5 stars, obviously, absolutely phenomenal. And then the last book that I read, which is also a favourite and absolutely incredible, Criminal. Absolutely criminal that I've waited this long to read this author, and that is Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky. This was my first Dostoevsky read. I'm definitely going to read another Dostoevsky book in the month of July, or most likely I will, because his writing is just incredible. The way that he talks about human nature and the way and why humans do what they do is just absolutely exceptional. I read the first like 2 pages and I knew this was going to become a favourite. He's able to tap into the human mind in a way that very few authors are able to do. And it is just refreshing to read someone who talks about things that I genuinely think about on a daily basis. It's really interesting as well because I've started writing a bit and I have a notebook that I write in. You know, I'm not writing a novel or anything. I just write about things that I'm interested in writing about, whatever kind of pops into my head. And there was something that I wrote about that I then read in Notes from Underground, having not read Notes from Underground before. And it was just so interesting to kind of see my view, but then also read Dostoevsky's view and the kind of parallels between them. Like, just phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. And by the way, this is not to say that I'm like as intelligent as Dostoevsky. I'm absolutely not. Like, this guy is just... I've never ever read anyone quite like him. And this is just having read one of his short books, right? Like, this is a very, very short book. It's like 130 pages. And yet I've probably got more from that 130 pages than I have from some books that are like 1,000 pages long. Like, it's insane. It's crazy. Like, what is this? 5 stars, obviously. I will probably do a deep dive into this one. I think I'm probably going to read The Gambler next, and then I will do a video reviewing both of those at the same time because I think that will be an interesting comparison point. So that's what I read in June. As you can tell, very kind of mixed genre-wise. In terms of what I'm planning to read for the month of July, I'm going to be on holiday for the first week of July. I'm going to Scotland again for like the a millionth time because it's literally one of my favourite countries to visit. Such a beautiful country, beautiful people, beautiful places to visit. Like, it's just an incredible place. If you've never been, I'd recommend going to Edinburgh and also Glasgow, but I think Edinburgh is just one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I'm planning to do a bit of reading. Like, I'm going with my best friend and we both just need to chill and relax. She's been before too, so we're literally just going there to relax. In terms of what I'm planning to read, Sabaa Tahir has a new book. I've forgotten the name of what it is, and I do have an e-arc for it, so I'm probably going to pick that up. The book that I'm planning to read when I'm in Scotland is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. But as I've said many times, I'm a mood reader. I don't know if I'll necessarily be in the mood for that when I'm traveling. I'm also potentially thinking of reading the first book in the Farseer trilogy, which I've completely forgotten what the name of it is because Rogue has been pushing me to read that. And I'm very curious about Robin Hobb and I do really want to read her stuff. So again, depending on mood, I might also take that with me. I'm probably going to finish off Emma M. Lyon, read volume 7. I'm also potentially going to start Vagabonds as well because that is... now that I'm going to get up to speed with Hideyasumi, I need a new manga to read, and that's probably the one that I'm going to pick up. I also got a really cool graphic novel by Joe Sacco called Palestine. He's a journalist and he's also a cartoonist, and he spent a bunch of time in Palestine. I think this was in the 90s. He kind of recounts his experience in Palestine in this comic book. So I think I'm going to pick that up. I also think I might pick up Mouse by Art Spiegelman. I might also pick that up in August. I'm not sure, because I really want to do a comparison point between the two comics, because apparently there are a lot of parallels. I will also pick up Those Below by Daniel Polanski. This is the second book in the duology that I've been reading with my Patreons. We ended up delaying the second book because none of us were really feeling it. And so I will definitely finish that off in the month of July as well. So there's a couple of options. I will probably read some fantasy in the month of July, but this month was pretty strong, I have to say. Like, I didn't read any particularly weak books. I think overall it was a pretty good experience. So let me know down below what books you read in the month of June. Let me know what you're planning to read in July as well. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what successes you had, but also what books didn't really meet your expectation. I'll see you down in the comments. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe as always. Take care, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.